And we're joined right now with Dave Lagreca from SiriusXM's Busted Open Channel 156 show that is one of the top-rated, if not the top-rated show on SiriusXM right now. Dave, thanks for coming in. So much
Rick,
to talk
thanks
about.
Thanks for having me, because you and I, text back and forth when it comes to wrestling, and we talk all the time. So this is awesome to be able to do this with you again.
Well, I appreciate it, because we were just saying it changes. The landscape of wrestling changes weekly. And so for us to talk, not since WrestleMania, there's so much to catch up on, including the big SummerSlam card that just happened. And so I was looking at this. It was the most watched SummerSlam in history, going back some 30 years now. Most watched event on Peacock, most watched event on WWE Network. There were 51,000 fans at Reliant Stadium. It was a massive event this year, in a time where WWE gets a lot of slack for maybe the creative. Man, they couldn't argue with the numbers they pulled in with merchandise and everything else over that weekend.
Yeah, and Rick, we could get into creative, and sometimes the WWE, as I know with you, we scratch our heads, but it's still an amazing product. They put on a bigger show better than anybody. And, now fans are back. We went over a year with having video screens as the audience on a Monday Night Raw and on SmackDown. So how great was it to be able to go to see live pro wrestling again? I think that's a big reason why you saw over 50,000 fans in Vegas.
Well, we were talking about the sponsorship records, the merchandise sales, everything like this. So at this point, it's just a juggernaut. It's rolling downhill. Where does the company, in your mind, find future growth? And is live touring going to be a part of this moving forward? It's come back so slowly, but where do you see that future growth, say over the next 3 to 5 years for this company?
Well, Rick, for the WWE specifically, I think we're seeing a different company than we've seen the last few years. I think they're really going to target a younger audience. They did that, about 15 years ago with great success with somebody like John Cena. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more gimmicks, personality, over-the-top type characters to attract that younger audience, because they have competition, I think, in my eyes, with AEW that really has been able to cater towards that 18 to 49-year-old demographic. So I think the WWE specifically is going after a younger audience, and I think you're going to see that type of growth almost immediately.
All right, something that jumped out to me creatively through SummerSlam, and I wanted to ask you about this. We did not see Asuka, Kevin Owens, Cesaro. Nakamura wasn't in the ring in a match, but we did see Jinder Mahal, Dominic Mysterio, Eva Marie, and Omos. I'm not quite following the dots there, why we're seeing these performers who are not nearly as seasoned get these big spotlights. And it's not like all of them, except for Omos, are rookies.
No, and Rick, I think this is the start of what I'm talking about with them going down a different road. Nick Khan has openly said when it comes to the WWE, that era of the indie wrestler, they've been there, they've done that. They want anybody and anyone that might have height, size, different type of athleticism outside of pro wrestling, over-the-top personality and characters. I really do think that's the direction that this company is going in moving forward. Now, you might think that and might listen to that and say to yourself, you know what, that's not going to be successful. But I think it could be. I think it's going to be more like a Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior type, as far as like a CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Ric Flair type of wrestler. I think it's really going to go back to where the WWE has found success in the past.
And those were some of the funnest days, right? Warrior, Hogan. But look, Brock Lesnar just came back as a good guy, and he's every bit as huge as those guys we just mentioned. So what's your take on now this possible good guy Brock Lesnar picking it up for the next month or year or so?
Well, first, I think the real reason why you're going to get a Brock that's going to get cheered is Roman Reigns. I think Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman has done such a phenomenal job with that character and storyline that fans are buying in to booing Roman Reigns. Here's a guy that they wanted the fans to cheer for. 5 years they were working on it and the fans weren't buying. But being able to boo him is easy. And with the character he has, it's easy. So Brock is coming back as like this conquering hero. And judging from the audience and the way that they were so loud to see him in Vegas for SummerSlam, I really do think that this Brock Lesnar Roman Reigns with Paul Heyman sprinkled in is going to be very, very successful and an interesting story for the WWE.
Right. Which side is Paul going to go with? That's really interesting. The other big return, of course, was Becky Lynch coming back after over a year. What's it been, about 15 months since we last saw her after Money in the Bank? So what were your thoughts on her return, and basically which side of the aisle is she going to fall on now?
Yeah, Rick, I hated her return.
Yeah,
I did. I really did. I didn't like the match with Bianca Belair. Bianca Belair, I think the fans have an emotional investment with Bianca Belair. I think she's a phenomenal athlete, and I think they did a good job for 6 months having the fans buy into her. And to have her lose in 24 seconds to Becky Lynch, I don't think does any favors to Bianca Belair. And it seems like they're bringing, at least for right now, Becky as a bad guy, as a heel. And I don't think the fans are going to want to boo a Becky Lynch. She's one of the more popular wrestlers in the WWE. So we'll see what happens. We have to always, be patient as fans. But so far, I'm not really loving what I'm seeing.
I'm with you there. Maybe it's one thing where Vince is letting her go to be a heel because she wants to pursue that, kind of like Austin did, 20 years ago now? You think that might be it?
Yeah, but Rick, you can't force that type of stuff. Like, one of the things that we got Daniel Bryan to be as big as he was, 7-8 years ago, and of course Stone Cold Steve Austin over 20 years ago, is it happened organically. The fans really kind of dictated where those personalities were going. And it's being honest and true to yourself that's really going to attract the fan and get them emotionally invested. You can't force it. And history shows when you try to force it, it doesn't work out. So you can't force it. You got to let it be organic.
One more question about the WWE roster right now. I want to get your thoughts on the women's revolution, which is like 5 years in now. I can't really call it a revolution anymore. Do you think it's kind of stalling right now? You've got Charlotte Flair. Some questions about her possibly leaving when her contract is up. Who knows? You've got Nikki Ash and kind of a new but childlike character. Who knows what's happening with Sasha Banks right now? I mean, she missed SummerSlam, and if that's not a health thing, you got to think that she might not be long for the company. I'm just speculating, but do you feel like there's some room for improvement on the women's side at this point?
I do, Rick. And, you mentioned about the last 5 years with Charlotte Flair, with Sasha Banks, with Bayley, and then bringing in Asuka. Yeah, like it was really like you were getting 5-star matches from women. Women were main eventing pay-per-views. But I think going back to what I said about where the company is going right now you have a Nikki ASH, which is a character. You have Alexa Bliss, which is all character driven. So I think that's the direction they're going in. And we'll see if it works or not. I'd rather see a classic between Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch than, Alexa Bliss hypnotizing somebody on a ladder. That's just me. But you know what? We'll see if it works for the WWE or not.
Yeah, maybe people will get behind Doudrop. Who knows? But I do miss Asuka in the ring. I miss her.
Yeah.
Can't wait till she comes back. All right, this next question is for our Connecticut viewers. Stamford, home to WWE for 25, 30 years. This is kind of a fun question, so I'm not expecting you to know all the details of this, but they're going to be moving their headquarters. They're spending about $100 million to move about 2 miles away from Titan Tower, and this is a big employer for Connecticut too. 700 jobs created by WWE makes it one of the biggest employers in the city of Stamford. What are your thoughts as the company continues to grow and is selling that iconic tower, Titan Towers, and your thoughts and memories of Titan Towers?
Well, Titan Towers is kind of iconic. I think everybody, when they're driving by there, slowly drives, tries to take a picture. I think that's kind of been a tourist attraction for people when they're traveling through Connecticut, or usually stuck in traffic in Connecticut, so you get a good look at it. But Rick, you and I are pro wrestling fans, and we love pro wrestling. I know I do. I mean, I host Busted Open because I'm truly passionate about pro wrestling. the WWE is more than just a pro wrestling product. They are a global commodity, whether it's, their studios making movies or documentaries or the merchandise. It's not just, they don't call themselves pro wrestling. They're sports entertainment. So when we look at pro wrestling, we think about what's going on in that ring. That's just a small part of that WWE empire. So I think when you look at what they're going to be able to do in this moving just 2 miles away in this new location, it's going to be about the global branding of the WWE. And hey, that's great for Connecticut, more jobs. And as you're finding out, they're not just hiring people that know and love pro wrestling. They're venturing outside the world of pro wrestling. So I really think it's going to be good for the community moving forward.
Yeah, and that's expected to open late 2022, I believe. Pretty cool.
Yep.
Actually, when I was younger, I went down to CNN Towers, and I went to the South Tower for a little tour, and they had the United States Tag Team title in one of the cases.
That's awesome.
And I was like, whoa, this is the one that like Big Josh and Ron Simmons held. That's the title. Forget the Midnight Express. Cool. Big Josh, Ron Simmons.
Hey, you know what? That means a lot to us, Rick. Those little things like those titles, and you see some of my memorabilia behind me. Like those are memories and moments of my childhood that you and I always cherish.
I want to get into that a little bit more, but what show right now is your favorite, Dave? There's so many to choose from. What show is your favorite?
I love NXT, but it seems like that might be changing over the next couple of weeks. I love the NWA. I think Billy Corgan has done a fantastic job with the nostalgia of the NWA, because I grew up a huge NWA fan, and I love AEW Dynamite. I really do. Tony Khan has been a very good friend to the show. He makes a weekly appearance on our show. He understands like the message that we're trying to get through to fans. Listen, Rick, pro wrestling to me is like pizza. You can make a really bad pizza, but I'm still going to eat it. It's still going to be good. As long as you have sauce and cheese on it, it's going to be good. So I'm always going to watch and appreciate everything, but probably for me right now would be the NWA and AEW as my favorites.
NWA is number one. Wow. All right. I haven't seen it since it's gone to Fight. I was watching it when it was on the YouTube, and I did like it, but then the whole pandemic kind of ended that for me, so maybe I'll have to get back into that. Let's talk about CM Punk, the big return, 7 years in the making. I can't think of a bigger return ever. What is that? The ice cream bar?
I got my CM Punk ice cream bar.
That's a collector's item. You got to turn that into an NFT, and you'll make some serious money.
Man, no way, dude. This is going with me. When I pass on, I told my wife she's got to throw this in the casket. That's coming with me.
Were you there?
I'm not selling
Did you go to it, or did somebody get that for you?
Mark Henry, who's my co-host, was the commentator for Rampage. He made sure to get me one.
What did he tell you about that moment? How did it feel, and how do you think it came off?
I thought, and Jim Cornette, who's not the biggest AEW fan, and Jim Cornette, who could be jaded at times, called that maybe the biggest moment in pro wrestling in the last 20 years. I think when you look at the honesty of it and the truthfulness of it and how real that moment was, it ranks up there to me as one of the best in pro wrestling the last 20 years. It really was. And when you see grown men crying, Rick, in the audience, when it touches you that way, that's the beauty of pro wrestling, is that emotional involvement. When it's able to grab you that tight and get you to cry, I think it was an extremely special moment. And I thought Punk hit a grand slam on Rampage that night.
For me, if I go back and watch a segment more than once, then I know it's going to go down in history, and for me, that definitely was one. I can't think of anything that was even close to that. I mean, if Steve Austin came back, like, say, 10 years after he retired, as great as that impact would it be, I don't think it would have been as much as CM Punk, because Austin had been to the top of the mountain. He'd done everything, but CM Punk left you wanting more, and so many people waited for 7 years for that moment, which you said, complete honesty and just relief. I don't know where it's going to go from here. I think we might have peaked early on this, but where do you see the CM Punk ride taking us in AEW?
And Rick, it's a great point by you. Is it's all about the follow-up, right? You have that moment, but how do you follow that moment up? And I think I don't know if AEW is sure where they're going to go with CM Punk. I think it's kind of like a wait and see type of attitude. He's going to have a big match with Darby Allin at All Out. We'll see where that goes, but Darby Allin is loved. You're going to have to find that heel that's really going to get under fan skin. And maybe we already have that with MJF, but it's going to be that story of pure love and hate that's really going to tell where CM Punk goes in the future with AEW.
Everybody's talking about the next big show going to be in Flushing in late September, but 1 week before that, just 1 week before, they're going to be in Newark, New Jersey. Hometown show. What are you expecting out of that show?
And that's too, Rick, that's a show that was supposed to take place back in March of 2020 and obviously got canceled because of the pandemic. So a lot of people have been holding on to their tickets for well over a year for this show. So, yeah, you're right. A lot of people are talking about the show in Queens where they're going to have about 19,000. But I think it's going to be that 14 to 15,000 in Newark where they're really going to be able to get the gauge and passion of that AEW fan. I think we might get some surprises. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. There's a lot of rumors about certain names and wrestlers that could be joining AEW. I think we're in for a big surprise in Newark, that show for AEW Dynamite.
It's going to be sold out, and that energy is just going to be, the Northeast crowds. It's going to be great for New Jersey. One more AEW question I have for you. Just over the past year, and well, let's say 18 months now, since the pandemic, we've had so many former WWE stars coming into AEW, starting, I'm thinking, with Matt Hardy. You had Malachi Black come in, Miro, Christian is there. And I think they've all added something to the product, but at the same time, you wonder when is enough from the old guard coming over. And with all these releases, do you see more WWE talent coming in? How do you see this playing out?
I do, Rick. And I think it's kind of like you kind of have to compare it to sports. Certain teams have a salary cap and they have to let people go. You're going to lose people with free agency. So if you think you can make something with a talent that left another team, you're going to sign that player. I think it's the same thing with AEW. There's a lot of talent out there that the WWE let go for whatever reason. And I think AEW is going to sign those that fit the product. There's certain wrestlers that don't. And I think, Rick, you have to be careful of that. You can't just sign everybody. You have to know your audience and know what your audience and who your audience wants to see. So I don't think they're going to sign everybody, but I do think they're going to sign some names that are formerly with the WWE.
Man, and here it is in 2021. I wanted to ask you, Dave, do you remember the month that you became a fan? Do you remember the year or even the month?
I do. It was June of 1982.
Okay.
I was by my friend's house, and he was watching Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I had never watched wrestling before. And Gordon Soley was interviewing Tommy Wildfire Rich, and it looked just like David Lee Roth. My brother was a big Van Halen fan. And I was like, wow, man, this guy is so cool looking. And then they went to commercial, and coming back from commercial, Gordon Soley was interviewing Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. And he had the chain, and he was screaming, and spit was coming out of his mouth. And then all of a sudden, there was a big brawl between those two. And from that moment on, I was hooked. So yeah, the first product I ever watched was TBS on a Saturday, Georgia Championship Wrestling. But I fell in love passionately going to the Meadowlands. My dad would take me monthly to the Meadowlands in East Rutherford, New Jersey, to watch wrestling live. And some of the greatest matches I've ever seen, some of the greatest icons and legends I saw in that building in East Rutherford, New Jersey.
Was that some of the Pro Wrestling USA cards there?
I saw Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat. I saw Ric Flair versus Harley Race. I saw the Rock and Roll Express against the Midnight Express. I saw the Russians against the Road Warriors. I mean, I saw so many iconic characters and personalities in that ring. Gary Michael Capetta doing the ring announcing, and Dick Worley as your referee. Jimmy Snuka against Roddy Piper I saw in that building. Hulk Hogan against Dr. D. David Schultz. Like, some of the greatest moments and matches I saw at the Meadowlands.
Yeah, the quality of those matches were so good.
Yep.
How's this for my timing? In August of '84, we had a fire in my house, and we were out for 4 months. We were living in a trailer. When we moved in, we got cable, December of '84. The first thing I remember once we got cable was the war to settle the score. I came across that on MTV, and I couldn't believe Roddy Piper and the attitude and just the intensity of the electricity of all the fans. I mean, what an introduction to wrestling. I mean, I'd seen sprinkles here and there, maybe World Class or other things, but to see Hogan and Piper just fisticuffs for 5 minutes or 6 minutes, it wasn't long, but it stayed with me to this day.
And that's the thing, Rick. Like, there could be a 8 or 9-year-old right now watching WWE that's seeing Nikki ASH and saying, "Wow, that's somebody I want to root for and I want to watch on a weekly basis." Or it could be, somebody like a Brock Lesnar that's coming back, or a Becky Lynch. Like, I really do feel we're going to have a new generation, whether it's the 18-year-old watching AEW or the 8-year-old watching WWE, that's going to be watching it for decades and decades like you and I have.
So did you catch Ric Flair at the NWA 73 show?
I sure did. Brought a tear to my eye. Rick, did you see the Lagreca heads that were at NWA 73?
Yeah, just to the left of the aisle. I saw that. Man, you're a franchise. You're a brand unto yourself. It is incredible. The T-shirts, the fat heads.
I learned it all from you, Rick. I've been following your lead, man. What you've been able to do.
Are you kidding? I'm following yours. You're the guy who started Busted Open, over 10 years ago now? It was 11 years?
It's going to be 13 years in April. It'll be 13 years that Busted Open has been on the air. And I've loved every day I hosted this show. It's been amazing.
Are we in a new golden era right now?
I don't know if it's I would label it a golden era. But if it's not a golden era, it's as close to it as it's been in decades. Like, I don't remember being this passionate and this pumped about pro wrestling since the late 90s. So it's been over 20 years since I felt this way as a fan.
I feel like there's one thing missing. I feel like if the number one company isn't firing on all cylinders, then it can't be a golden age, and there's work to be done. Definitely with World Wrestling Entertainment when it comes to what I'm watching on the air, because some of it just seems like I've seen it 1,000 times before.
Rick, I can't, I don't want to come on and hate on WWE, but watching Monday Night Raw at times could be a chore. And it feels like I've seen that match 1,000 times. Though maybe right now they're changing that landscape for the better.
Well, it's the thing is, we know that they can do so much better. Last night they had Shayna Baszler versus Rhea Ripley. With any kind of build in any other world, that would be a WrestleMania caliber slugfest, brawl, a classic. And it's a 5-minute filler match on a Monday night. I just don't understand that.
Yeah, and we saw that too with Asuka.
Yep.
Yeah, we saw that with Asuka too. Like, Asuka and Charlotte was kind of like a throwaway match on Monday Night Raw. That was one of the best WrestleMania matches I've seen in the last 10 to 15 years. So yeah, I'm hoping they get it, because like you said, Rick, it could change like that. When they decide to turn it on, they turn it on in a big way.
They just need to do it with more storylines.
Yes.
More than just one or two. Yeah. All right, Dave, I'll leave you with this. I got one trivia question. You know I like to kind of stump you. All right, so let's try this.
Here we go.
I think you're going to get this one.
Okay.
All right, there have been 6 people to hold the $1 million title. Can you name them? It's a fun one.
Ted DiBiase.
Yeah.
Virgil.
Unlikely champion.
We saw LA Knight holding it.
Yep.
We saw Cameron Grimes currently holding it.
You got 2 more.
Who else, Rick?
Oh, you got it. Come on, you think about mid-90s.
Oh, Stone Cold.
There you go. One more. Ted DiBiase's.
Ted DiBiase, Virgil,
from his
Stone
loins.
Cold.
From Ted DiBiase's loins.
Oh, geez, the name's mistaken me, Rick. I need your help. My
Ted
brain
Jr.
is mush. Oh yeah, Ted DiBiase
Remember when
Jr.
he came back and he had
Who,
Virgil?
by the way, criminally underrated. I was always a big fan of his, and
Yeah?
you know that whole
The
the
legacy?
teaming with Cody and Randy. I thought that was great. The whole legacy tag team. I thought they were great.
What about Manu? Don't be hating on Manu.
That's true. That's true.
Greatest
no, Rick,
wrestling
man,
dynasty.
I love talking wrestling with you, man. It's always a pleasure
Great
being able to
wrestling
talk
dynasty
wrestling with
there. Yeah, Dave Lagreca from SiriusXM, Busted Open, channel 156. Thank you so much. This was a great time, and we'll see you at the wrestling matches, I guess.
you. All right, Rick. You and I got to be at ringside one day together.
I'll be carrying my Rougeau power sign.
There you go.
All right, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.